Hello, my name is Alan Gilmore, and I produced this entertainment video so that you could see how I made a deburring tool for use on thin sheet metal so that I could deburr my RV12 wing ribs. The problem that I started out with was I wanted to use a double-edged deburring tool. And as you can see, this is a nice deburring tool for using two edges because it's got a nice V-notch in it. The problem is that when I was deburring this wing rib, the wing rib is made out of very thin metal. It's only 20 thousandths. And in this deburring tool, and it's really hard to see, but in the very bottom of that V-notch is a radius. It's actually a curve with about a 10 thousandths radius. And as a result, it really doesn't deburr thin metal very well. The other problem is, if you notice on these wing ribs, there's a scalloped edge across the sides. And the deburring tool just would not travel through those scallops very well. Now, I did try using one of these deburring tools. It worked very well on these circles or holes in the center of the wing ribs. But they didn't work very well on scallops, again, because of the physical shape. So I thought about it for a while, and I came up with an idea, and I tried this out. I started with this knife sharpener, because I figured that a knife was a very thin piece of metal, and if you could make it sharp, you could use a similar process to remove the sharp edges on a piece of thin sheet metal. And I started with this. This is a knife sharpener, and inside the knife sharpener are these small metal discs, and these are very, very hard because they do the sharpening, and they sit down inside of the knife sharpener. And they work on the principle that as you draw the knife through, what happens is these metal discs just barely overlap, and they create a very sharp notch in which the cutting edge drags through and makes it very sharp. Now, I didn't want to sharpen the edges of my wing ribs, but I did want to remove that little burr on the edges. And so I tried it out, and it worked very well. My first pass at it ended up with a tool that looked like this. Simply two of the discs bolted to a piece of aluminum, and then I would use the aluminum handle and hold it and run it down the edges of the aluminum wing rib. And that worked out very well. I did make one slight improvement in it, and that was in the handle to give it a little better action. So I'm going to show you how I built the final one in this coming video. Once you've got your sheet metal, what you want to do first of all is to trim it down to size. The size I used was 4 inches wide by 4.5 inches long. It's an approximate size. Anything close to that will work. The other thing I did was I put a notch down in the very bottom, and between or on each side of the notch I drilled 2 holes. Now, the holes were originally the size that would be a nice fit for the 4mm bolts. But then what I did was, after I drilled those holes, I made the holes a little bit bigger so that I could have a little bit of slop, and I could actually adjust the distance slightly between the sharpening discs. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to be very accurate in my position setting of these two sharpening discs, because I want just a very slight overlap between them, and that's why I had a little bit of slop in the holes so I could make that adjustment. The next thing you want to do is you want to remove 3 of these discs from the knife sharpener. Now, why 3? You only need 2 to sharpen. The reason is you need to take the third one and grind down one edge on your bench grinder so that it looks like this. Don't even try and cut it with a hacksaw, because these are very, very hard metal. The only thing that's going to cut it is your bench grinder, and it'll do a very quick job. Be sure you use a pair of pliers to hold it, because it gets hot when you do this. The next thing I did was I bolted one of the discs onto the aluminum sheet metal. And as you can see, it's kind of loose. It's tightened almost all the way, but it's slightly loose, and I'll leave it like that until I get the other piece put on. The next thing you want to do is take the second bolt and bolt the two other discs on. And when you bolt these on, the first disc you put on wants to be the one that you ground the edge off of. And the reason you want to put that on is because, as you can see here, you put it on and then turn it so it is away from the notch. And that leaves a nice opening for the blade to go through, or for the sheet metal to pass through. Then you take the unmodified disc and put it on top of that, and then you put another lock nut on there and tighten it up. At this point, what you do is you adjust the distance between those two blades so they just barely overlap, and then you tighten down both lock nuts, and your tool is finished. And when you're done, it looks like that. Well, now comes the fun part. We get to actually use the tool. And when I use this, and I'm going to put another video on YouTube to show how I do the whole rib. But I just want to preface using this tool by saying that I use a drum sander with a very fine piece of sandpaper in it to actually go through and sand this first. Once that's done, I come back with the tool, and here's the cool part. All I do is I simply rake the tool across the sharp edge, and it removes both sides at the same time and gives me a very nice deburred edge. And then, just for the heck of it, I turn it around and go in the other direction because it is a scalloped edge, and I want to make sure I didn't miss any of the little burrs going over the tops of the scallops. And once you've done that 3 or 4 times, you end up with all of the burrs being removed from the sides. And at that point, it's simply a matter of taking the old trusty Scotch Brite and running it back and forth a little bit to make it, as they say, smooth as a baby's butt. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you'd like, check out my website, RV12info.com.